It was a quiet day on the small, isolated planet of Epsilon 4, where the human colonists lived. Ethan, a young human man, had always led a simple life. He wasn't a soldier or a warrior, just someone who worked in the fields, tending to crops, and running errands for his community. But that all changed on one fateful day. Ethan was out on a routine trip to the outskirts of the colony when he heard a strange noise in the sky. Looking up, his eyes widened as he saw a large alien ship falling from the sky. The ship was surrounded by flames, and the sound of battle echoed in the air. It was clear that the ship was in trouble. Without thinking, Ethan raced toward the site of the crash. His instincts told him that something was wrong, but he couldn't just ignore it. As he approached, he saw the ship crash into the rocky terrain, sending dust and debris flying in all directions. The moment the dust cleared, Ethan saw something that made his heart race. Lying among the wreckage was a figure, a woman, surrounded by blood and sparks from the damaged ship. She was unlike any being Ethan had ever seen. Her skin was a shade of deep blue, and her silver hair shimmered under the light of the twin suns. Her clothing was made from materials that Ethan couldn't even recognize, and her eyes-piercing violet eyes were filled with pain. Ethan hesitated for only a moment before rushing forward. The woman's breathing was shallow and her pulse weak. He knelt beside her and checked her injuries. She was badly hurt. Her arm was broken and there were deep cuts on her side. The most disturbing thing was the way her breathing seemed to falter with each passing second. She was fading fast. Without thinking about the danger, Ethan carefully lifted her into his arms. The woman, though unconscious, was surprisingly light. He ran as fast as he could, trying to get her to safety. As he ran, he heard the sound of explosions in the distance, the battle raging on. He couldn't help but wonder who had attacked. This strange woman, and why? Bah! But for now, his only focus was getting her to safety. After a short sprint, Ethan arrived at a small, hidden cave he knew well. It was a safe place, far from the colony, where he often went to think or escape the everyday life of the settlement. He gently laid the woman on the cool stone floor, trying not to cause her any more pain. With quick hands, he used what little medical knowledge he had to tend to her wounds. He knew that his supplies were limited, but he did his best. He bound her broken arm with strips of cloth and used a small amount of water to clean her cuts. But as he worked, something unexpected happened. The woman's eyes fluttered open. At first she looked confused, her violet eyes darting around as if trying to understand where she was. Then she focused on Ethan, and her gaze softened. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice weak but filled. With curiosity, Ethan was taken aback by her question. She had a strange accent, different from anything he had heard before. I'm Ethan. I found you after your ship crashed," he explained, his voice calm but filled with concern. "Badly hurt. I'm trying to help you." The woman looked at him with a mixture of surprise and gratitude. She seemed to understand what he was saying, but her eyes never left his. After a few moments, she spoke again, her voice barely above a whisper. "I am Saren, Queen of the Scifi Empire. You've saved my life." Ethan's heart skipped a beat. Had heard of the Scifi, a powerful alien race known for their vast empire and advanced technology. But he never imagined he'd meet one of their leaders, let alone save one. He couldn't help but feel a sense of awe mixed with fear. What had brought her here, and why was she in danger? Saren's breathing became more even as the painkillers Ethan had given her started to take effect. But she still seemed weak, unable to move much on her own. She reached out a hand, placing it lightly on Ethan's arm. "Thank you," she whispered again, her violet eyes locking onto his. "I am in your debt." Ethan felt a rush of emotions. He had never been one to think of himself as a hero, but in that moment, he realized that he had done something extraordinary. He had saved the life of a being from another world, Queen no less. Over the next few hours, Ethan stayed by Saren's side, tending to her wounds and keeping watch. He didn't know how long it would take for her to recover, or if she could ever return to her empire. But he knew one thing for sure: the connection between them, however brief, was real. As night fell, the two of them sat by a small fire in the cave. Saren had regained enough strength to sit up and talk, and they began to converse. At first it was awkward, as neither of them knew how to approach the situation. Ethan had never met anyone like Saren before, and she, too, was unfamiliar with the ways of humans. But as they spoke, something shifted. They began to open up to each other, sharing stories of their worlds and their lives. Saren spoke of her empire, of the people she ruled, and the pressures she faced as a queen. Ethan, in turn, told her about his simple life on Epsilon 4, about his dreams of exploring the galaxy and seeing new things. There was something comforting in their shared stories, something that made both of them feel less alone in the vastness of the universe. And as the night stretched on, the unspoken connection between them grew. It was more than just a shared experience of survival. It was something deeper, something neither of them had expected. As the fire crackled and the night air cooled, Saren looked at Ethan, her eyes filled with something that was hard to name. She reached out, her hand gently brushing his. "I may never be able to repay you for this," she said softly, her voice almost a whisper. "Oh, but I will never forget your kindness." Ethan smiled, feeling a warmth spread through him. He wasn't looking for repayment. All he wanted was to ensure that she was safe. And maybe, just maybe, he had found something in her that he hadn't realized he was searching for. As they sat together in silence, the stars above seemed to have shined brighter. Neither of them knew what the future held, but they both knew one thing. This moment, this night, would stay with them forever. 5 years had passed since Ethan saved the life of Saren, the queen of the Scifi Empire. He hadn't heard from her since that night in the cave on Epsilon 4. He had disappeared without a trace, turning to his quiet life far away from any form of attention. He kept his distance from the galaxy's politics and the Scifi Empire. The memory of Saren's violet eyes and the warmth they shared remained in his heart. But he never expected to see her again. Saren, however, couldn't forget. The queen had spent the last 5 years thinking about the human who had saved her. No one had ever shown her the kind of kindness that Ethan had. He had put his own life in danger to save her, and she couldn't simply let go of the debt she owed him. At first, Saren had tried to push the memory aside. She was a ruler, after all, with more important matters to attend to. But the thought of Ethan haunted her. She needed to know who he was, where he had gone, and what had become of him. Her people, the Scifi, ruled over an empire stretching across thousands of planets. Saren had access to incredible resources, and her empire's intelligence network was unmatched. Yet, when it came to tracking down one lone human, it was as though he had disappeared from the face of the universe. No records, no traces, clues. Saren didn't understand it. Her empire's technology could track the movements of entire fleets across vast stretches of space, but when it came to finding Ethan, everything failed. It was as if he had never existed, his life erased from the galaxy's history, despite her many responsibilities. Saren couldn't help herself. She began to search in secret. Every day she would scan reports from her spies, going through countless records and data from every corner of the galaxy, hoping to find even the smallest sign of Ethan. But each search ended in frustration. Saren became more determined. She used her influence to request the assistance of her best operatives, though she couldn't reveal why she was so obsessed with finding one human. She couldn't explain it to her advisors or her council. They would not understand. As time went on, Saren's obsession grew. There were many things she had to focus on as a queen: the health of her empire, the growing tensions with rival species, and the increasing threat of war from those who sought to overthrow her rule. Yet, no matter how hard she tried to concentrate on those matters, her mind kept drifting back to Ethan. His face, his smile, his words, it all haunted her. One day, while reviewing a set of intelligence reports, she came across a small detail, buried deep within a routine security scan. There was an anomaly in the system, something that didn't fit. It was a human ship, registered under an old, forgotten name. The ship was located on a distant world, far outside the reach of any major empire. Saren felt her heart race. Could it be? Was it possible that Ethan was out there? Could he still be alive, living on some isolated planet far from the reach of her empire? Without hesitation, Saren called for her personal fleet, ordered them to prepare for a secret mission. No one knew where she was going or why. She left her advisors behind, not telling them the true purpose of her journey. This was something personal, something that only she could understand. She had to find him. Meanwhile, Ethan had kept his promise to himself. He had left the past behind, choosing to live a quiet life far from the galaxy's chaos. He worked in the fields of a small farming colony, far from any conflict, far from any government or royal demands. His days were simple. He spent most of his time planting crops, tending to animals, and occasionally fixing broken machines. It was a peaceful life, but deep down, something was missing. Every so often, Ethan would think about Saren. He would remember the way she looked at him, the way they had talked through the night, the way she had trusted him. The thought of her brought a bittersweet feeling. He'd never felt such a connection with anyone before. And yet, after that night, he had disappeared without a trace. He had left her behind, afraid of what might happen if he stayed. But as time passed, the pain of their separation dulled. He accepted it, telling himself that it was better this way. Saren had her empire, and he had his quiet life. The two of them came from different worlds, literally and figuratively. It wasn't meant to be. Still, the question lingered in the back of his mind. Did she ever think of him? Was she still out there, somewhere, leading her people, unaware of his simple life? He tried to push the thought aside, but it never quite left him. One evening, as Ethan was working late in the fields, a ship appeared in the sky. It was unlike any ship he had ever seen before, massive and sleek, cutting through the sky with a grace that seemed almost otherworldly. At first, Ethan thought it might be a military vessel or a cargo ship passing through, but then the ship began to descend, its engines roaring as it came closer to the ground. Ethan's heart stopped when he recognized the design. It was a Scifi ship, unmistakable with its silver and violet markings. The ship landed just a few miles away, kicking up dirt and dust in its wake. Ethan froze. His mind raced. Was this a coincidence? Could it be? His hands trembled as he wiped his forehead, trying to make sense of the situation. Meant the last time he saw such a ship was when he helped the queen of the Scifi Empire. And then, as the ship's ramp lowered, Saren stepped out. Her violet eyes met his, and for a moment neither of them spoke. Time seemed to stop. Ethan's heart raced, and Saren's face softened as she looked at him. She had found him. Ethan stood frozen, staring at the ship that had just landed nearby. He couldn't believe his eyes. It was the same design, the same markings, just like the one from that night. The Scifi ship had come to his quiet world, and there standing at the ramp was Saren, the woman he had saved 5 years ago. For a moment, neither of them moved. The quiet of the evening air felt thick with anticipation. Ethan's heart pounded in his chest. What was she doing here? How did she find him? He never expected to see her again. And now, here she was, standing in front of him, her violet eyes searching his face as if she had been looking for him all this time. Saren took a slow step forward, her eyes locked on him. Her once silver hair, now streaked with hints of white, caught the light of the setting suns. She looked the same, yet there was something different about her, something more confident, more regal. She was a queen, after all, and her time as ruler had only strengthened her presence. But in this moment, she wasn't a ruler. She was just a woman who had come to find the man who had saved her life. Ethan, she said softly, her voice carrying the weight of both time and emotion. Ethan swallowed hard, unsure of what to say. He had spent the last 5 years trying to forget her, trying to move on with his life. But seeing her now, standing before him, all those feelings came rushing back. He couldn't deny the connection he had felt that night, but he also knew that their worlds were too different for something to come of it. He finally managed, his voice hoarse. The silence between them grew, stretching out like an unspoken question. Neither of them knew where to begin. Saren took another step forward, closing the distance between them. "I've been searching for you," she said, her tone almost apologetic. "For 5 years I've tried to find you, and now, here you are." Ethan's mind raced. She had been searching for him? He wasn't sure how to feel about that. Part of him was overwhelmed with joy to see her again, while another part of him felt fear. Fear of the unknown, fear of the future, fear of what this meant for both of them. "Why?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Why go through all that trouble? I told you I was no one special. I didn't need thanks. Just did what anyone would have done." Saren paused, her eyes searching his face for understanding. "You saved my life," she said, her voice full of conviction. "Just in that moment, you showed me something I never thought I would feel: kindness. It's something I've been looking for ever since." Ethan felt a pang in his chest. She'd been searching for kindness, something real in a world filled with power, struggles, and endless political games. And he had given her that, even if it was only for one night. But that night had meant something to both of them, hadn't it? "I didn't mean to make you feel that way," he said, his voice soft. "I just ... I couldn't leave you there. Not after what happened." Saren nodded slowly, her gaze unwavering. I know what you did, Ethan, and I know you left because you thought you didn't belong in my world. But I've been living with the same feeling. It's a feeling that we're meant to be something more than just passing strangers. I couldn't shake it. I needed to see you again. I needed to understand." Ethan was torn. He had lived a life of solitude for so long, away from the galaxy's politics, away from anything that could tie him to the chaos. But now, here she was, Saren, a queen of a powerful empire, standing before him, asking for something he wasn't sure he could give. "Don't belong in your world, Saren," he said, taking a step back. "I'm just a simple farmer. You're a queen. Your people need you. You can't just throw that all away for one human." Saran's expression softened, and she stepped forward, gently reaching out to touch his arm. "I know the responsibility I have as a queen. I don't want to abandon my empire, but I also don't want to live a life of regret. You gave me something I can't forget. I just want to know if what we shared that night meant as much to you as it did to me." Ethan looked into her eyes, feeling the weight of her words. He wanted to tell her that it did, that it meant everything to him, but he was afraid of the consequences, afraid of what would happen if he let himself fall for her again. "Don't know if I can give you what you're looking for," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I've been running from this for years, Saren. I'm not part of your world. I don't know how to fit into it." Saren's gaze never wavered. She could see the fear in his eyes. The fear of the unknown, the fear of the future. Understood that. But she also knew something that Ethan didn't. She knew that life was too short to run from what you truly wanted. "I'm not asking you to be a part of my world," she said softly. "I'm asking you to be a part of my life, whatever that means." The words hung in the air between them, and for the first time, Ethan allowed himself to fully look at her. The woman who had saved his heart as much as he had saved hers. The woman who had searched for him across the vast reaches of space, just to find the connection they had once shared. "Saren, Ethan began, but he was interrupted by the sound of a distant explosion. His head turned quickly toward the horizon, his senses immediately on alert. Saren's expression shifted, her eyes narrowing. "It's happening again, isn't it?" she said, more to herself than to him. Ethan knew what she meant. The war, the one that had pushed her ship into battle all those years ago. The one that still threatened her empire. "I don't want to go back to that," she said, her voice filled with determination. "But I don't want to leave you either." Ethan took a deep breath, his heart racing once again. He had no answers for her. But one thing was clear. Everything was about to change. The distant explosion faded, and the night grew tense. Ethan's instincts kicked in. He knew that sound all too well. It wasn't just a random blast, it was a signal, sign that something was coming, and it was dangerous. He turned back to Saren, who stood tall, her eyes scanning the horizon with the focus of a seasoned ruler. "Is it them?" Ethan asked, his voice low but sharp. He knew that Saren wasn't just a queen by title. She had been through more battles than most beings could ever imagine. Yes, she replied quietly, her tone steady. It's the Kivori, a rival faction that has been threatening my empire for years. They know I'm here, and they'll come for us. Ethan's heart skipped a beat. He had no idea who the Kivori were, but the look on Saren's face told him everything. We're dangerous, and they wouldn't hesitate to take what they wanted. We need to get back to the ship, Saren continued, her voice firm with command. They're here for me, but they'll destroy anything in their path to get what they want. Ethan hesitated. He hadn't signed up for this. He was just a simple man, living in peace, far away from the violence of the galaxy. But Saren wasn't just anyone. She was the queen, and he couldn't stand by and do nothing. Then let's go, Ethan said, determination filling his voice. He wasn't about to leave her to face this threat alone. Together, they made their way toward the Scifi ship. As they walked, Ethan couldn't help but feel a deep sense of unease. He had no experience in battle, no knowledge of what was coming, but he knew one thing for sure. He couldn't let Saren face this alone. When they reached the ship, Saren immediately went to the control panel, her hands moving quickly over the alien technology. Ethan stood back, watching her with awe. Scifi's ship was a marvel of designs, sleek, powerful, and far more advanced than anything he had ever seen. Are you sure you want me involved in this? Ethan asked, his voice filled with uncertainty. I'm not a soldier. I don't know what I'm doing. Saren paused for a moment, looking at him. Her eyes softened, and for a brief moment, the fierce queen was replaced by the woman who had shared a night with him. The woman who had come to care for him in ways that neither of them could fully explain. I need you, she said, her voice gentle but resolute. Not just because of what you can do, but because of who you are. You saved my life. You gave me something real. Now we fight together. Ethan felt a warmth in his chest at her words. She trusted him. And for the first time in a long time, he felt the weight of responsibility not just for his own life, but for hers as well. With a deep breath, Ethan stepped forward and placed his hand on the control panel beside hers. Together, they began the process of preparing the ship for launch. The Kivori were coming, and they didn't have much time. Hours later, the Scifi ship took off, slicing through the sky and into space with breathtaking speed. Ethan couldn't help but marvel at the ship's capabilities. He had never seen anything like it, smooth, powerful, and almost silent as it soared through the stars. The stars, once distant and cold, now felt like allies as they ventured into the unknown. Saren sat beside him at the controls, her focus unwavering as she navigated the ship. The hum of the engines filled the silence, and Ethan could feel the tension in the air. I should have prepared better, Saren murmured, her eyes fixed on the distant stars ahead. The Kivori will stop at nothing to get what they want. I wasn't expecting them to find me here. Ethan could hear the weight of regret in her voice, and he could see the burden she carried. She had been running from this threat for so long, trying to protect her empire, her people, and now everything had come to a head. You didn't ask for any of this, Ethan said quietly, but you're doing the best you can. And that's all anyone can ask of you. Saren glanced at him, her eyes softening. Thank you, Ethan. You don't know how much it means to me to have you here. For a moment, the two of them shared a look, quiet understanding that went beyond words. They had both been thrown into a situation neither of them had wanted. But now, they were in it together. Somehow, that made it all feel less terrifying. Approaching. The Kivori fleet, the Scifi ship, entered the edge of the Kivori fleet's territory, and the once silent tension in the ship became palpable. Ethan could see the massive Kivori ships in the distance, their dark, menacing shapes dwarfing the smaller Scifi ship. He swallowed hard, his mind racing with questions. How would they survive this? What could they do against such an overwhelming force? Saren's fingers flew over the controls, adjusting the ship's speed and trajectory. Stay calm, she said, her voice steady. We're going to get through this. Ethan nodded, though his heart was racing. He wasn't sure what kind. A battle lay ahead, but he knew one thing for sure. Saren wasn't going to face this alone. He had come to care for her more deeply than he had ever imagined. And now, The fight was for her, and for the future they both wanted. As the ship got closer to the Kavori fleet, the first signs of an attack came. Energy blasts lit up the dark expanse of space as the Kavori ships began to fire upon them. Saren expertly dodged, maneuvering the ship with incredible skill. Ethan could barely keep up with the speed and precision of the ship's movements, but he didn't care. All that mattered was keeping Saren safe. "They're getting closer," Ethan said, his voice tense. "What do we do now?" Saren's eyes glowed with determination. "We fight back," she said, "and we survive together." The Scifi ship's weapon systems powered up, and for the first time since they had left the planet, Ethan felt a surge of adrenaline. They weren't just running anymore, they were standing their ground. The battle had begun. The battle in space had erupted faster than Ethan could comprehend. The once calm and silent stars were now alive with explosions, energy blasts, and the hum of powerful weapons. The Scifi ship shook as the Kavori fleet fired relentlessly. But Saren remained focused, her hands gripping the controls with the precision of a seasoned leader. Ethan could feel the urgency in the air. The ship was fast, but it was no match for the sheer size and firepower of the Kavori fleet. Yet, Saren's calmness reassured him. She wasn't just a queen, she was a fighter, and she was determined to protect what she had left. "Hold on," Saren's voice rang out as she steered the ship through a tight turn. Narrowly avoiding a blast that tore through the space they had just occupied, Ethan's heart pounded. But he didn't feel fear not with Saren at the helm. He was more afraid of losing her than the battle itself. He could feel her presence beside him, not just as the queen of the Scifi Empire, but as someone who had come to mean more to him than he had ever expected. "Saren, what's the plan?" Ethan shouted over the noise of the ship's engines and explosions. "We fight," she said, her voice calm but determined. "I won't let them take my empire. They think they can break me, but they've underestimated the Scifi and me." Ethan nodded, understanding her resolve. They were not just fighting for survival, they were fighting for something greater. "Something worth protecting?" "We can do this," Ethan said, his voice filled with conviction. Despite his lack of combat experience, he knew that standing by Saren's side was the right choice. This wasn't just her fight. It was theirs. Saren's eyes flickered with approval as she activated the ship's weapon systems. The ship's blasters fired with precision, targeting the Kavori ships with incredible force. The energy blasts from the Scifi ship lit up the dark expanse of space, but the Kavori fleet retaliated with equal fury. Ethan braced himself as the ship shook again, the force of an explosion rattling the entire vessel. The Kavori were not going to let up, and their strength was overwhelming. Yet Saren fought with every bit of strength she had, her focus unwavering as she expertly piloted the ship through the chaos. Ethan's eyes remained on the battle around them, watching as Saren's every move seemed to defy the odds. She was a queen in every sense of the word, a warrior, a protector, and someone who would stop at nothing to defend her people. "We need to get closer to their command ship," Saren said suddenly, breaking the silence. "It's the heart of their fleet. If we take it down, we can break their hold." Ethan nodded, his mind racing. "What do you need me to do?" "I need you to help me fire the main cannon," Saren said. "It's a long shot, but if we hit the command ship in the right spot, it'll destabilize their entire fleet." Ethan's heart skipped a beat. The main cannon. It was something he had no experience with, but he wasn't about to back down now. "Just tell me what to do." Saren's eyes softened for a brief moment. "Trust me, Ethan. We can do this." "Together," he nodded, his mind focused. He had no choice but to trust her hand. He did, completely. Together, they were unstoppable. Saren quickly adjusted the ship's course, bringing them closer to the heart of the Kavori fleet. The Kavori. Ships swarmed around them, but Saren expertly dodged their attacks, maneuvering the Scifi ship with incredible skill. Ethan could feel the ship hum beneath them, the power building as they neared their target. "Ready?" Saren asked, her voice steady despite the chaos around them. Ethan took a deep breath. Saren activated the targeting system, and Ethan watched as the cannon's targeting reticle locked onto the Kavori command ship. He gripped the firing controls, his heart racing. The ship shook violently as the Kavori fleet closed in on them, but Ethan and Saren remained focused. "Now," Saren commanded, Ethan pressed the button, and the ship's main cannon fired with a deafening roar. The blast tore through the void of space, a bright beam of energy racing toward the Kavori command ship. Time seemed to slow as the beam hit its target, the explosion lighting up the entire battlefield. The Kavori command ship erupted in a violent explosion, sending shockwaves through the fleet. Ships nearby were torn apart as the blast cascaded through the Kavori ranks. For a moment, there was silence, and then the sound of the battle picked up once again. "We did it," Ethan said breathlessly, his voice full of awe. Saren didn't respond immediately. Her eyes remained locked on the screen as the Kavori fleet began to fall apart. Their ships were losing coordination, their attacks growing weaker. The heart of their fleet had been destroyed, the rest were in disarray. "It's not over yet," Saren said, her voice firm. "We need to finish this." Ethan could see the determination in her eyes. She wasn't just a queen, she was a force of nature. He felt a surge of pride knowing that he was standing beside her, fighting for something more than just survival. They were fighting for their future. The Zaire ship continued to fire, its weapons cutting through the Kivori ships with precision. The Kivori fleet was crumbling, and it was only a matter of time before they were defeated. But the battle wasn't just about strategy, it was about survival. And Saren would not stop until the threat was gone. As the last of the Kivori ships were destroyed, Saren let out a long breath. The battle was over. The enemy had been defeated. But as the silence settled around them, Ethan could see the exhaustion in Saren's eyes. She had given everything to protect her people, and in the end, it had worked. "We did it," Saren said softly, a smile tugging at the corner of her lips. "It's over." Ethan looked at her, his heart swelling with emotion. "We're amazing," he said. "I've never seen anyone fight like that." Saren's smile grew, though there was a trace of sadness in her eyes. "I fight because I have to, but it's people like you, Ethan, who remind me that there's more to life than just duty. I won't forget this. I won't forget you." Ethan's heart skipped a beat. He knew in that moment that their bond had grown stronger than ever. This battle, this victory, wasn't just about saving her empire, it was about the connection they shared. A connection that had withstood the test of time and war. And no matter what came next, Ethan knew that Saren would always be a part of his life. The fight had brought them together, but it was love that would keep them strong. The stars outside the Zaire ship shimmered softly as the battle came to an end. The Kavori fleet had been destroyed, their strength broken. Saren and Ethan sat in the quiet aftermath, the hum of the ship's engines, the only sound that filled the space around them. The danger had passed, but the silence between them felt heavier than ever. Saren glanced at Ethan, her heart still racing from the battle. She was exhausted, but her mind wouldn't stop running. Her empire had been saved, but at what cost? The war wasn't over. There would be more battles, more challenges, but for now, she had time to think about the decision that had been weighing on her heart since she found Ethan again. "Ethan," she started, her voice soft and steady. "I need to tell you something." Ethan turned to her, his face filled with concern. He could see the seriousness in her eyes, and he felt a knot form in his stomach. He had known this moment would come. They'd fought side by side, survived together, but there was something between them, something that both of them had tried to ignore. "You've done more for me than anyone ever has," Saren continued. "I've asked you to help me fight a war that's not yours. You didn't owe me anything, but you stayed. You fought. And I need to understand why." Ethan took a deep breath. He had thought about this for so long, tried to make sense of the feelings he had for her. He had known from the moment she had found him again that his life would change. But he hadn't been ready for this, for the weight of the decision that he now had to make. "I stayed because you're more than just a queen to me, Saren," Ethan said, his voice calm but filled with emotion. "I stayed because, in you, I found something I didn't even know I was looking for. I've never felt more alive than when I was by your side. And now, I can't imagine going back to a life without you." Saren's eyes softened as she looked at him, a mix of relief and sadness washing over her. "But you don't belong in my world, Ethan. You can't live a life like mine. I have duties, responsibilities. And you?" She stopped, her voice trembling slightly. "You deserve a life that isn't filled with war and chaos. You deserve peace, and I don't want to take that from you. Ethan reached out, gently taking her hand in his. Saren, he said softly, you're not taking anything from me. You gave me something I've never had purpose. I won't let fear of the unknown keep me from being with you. I know the challenges, I know the risks, but I want to be by your side. I want to help you, whatever that means. The sincerity in his words made Saren's heart swell. She had spent so long pushing people away, hiding behind the armor of her crown, but with Ethan, she didn't have to hide. With him, she could be something more than just a ruler. She could be a woman who loved and was loved in return. I'm not afraid of the battle anymore, Ethan, she whispered, her voice filled with quiet strength. But I'm afraid of losing you, Ethan smiled, his thumb gently brushing her hand. You won't lose me, Saren. Not now. Not ever. Saren looked into his eyes, searching for any doubt, any hesitation, but there was none. And in that moment, she knew that no matter what the future held, they could face it together. The ship's alarm suddenly blared, breaking the peaceful silence between them. Ethan and Saren looked up, their minds immediately shifting back to the reality of their situation. The Kavori fleet might be defeated, but there were still enemies out there. The galaxy was never truly at peace. Saren quickly stood, her royal composure returning as she activated the communication system. Report, she demanded, her voice firm. One of her officers appeared on the screen. Your Majesty, there's a distress signal coming from the edge of the system. It's from one of our outposts. Looks like the Kavori might have left some ships behind to regroup. Saren's expression hardened. I'll take command. Prepare the fleet. We'll deal with this once and for all. Ethan stood by her side, his resolve strengthening. I'm coming with you. Saren turned to him, her eyes narrowing slightly. This is no longer a fight for you. It's my responsibility. I made my choice, Saren, Ethan said, his voice unwavering. I'm with you, always. For a moment, Saren hesitated.
Oh, wait.
She had always carried the weight of her empire on her shoulders, and she had never asked anyone to share that burden. But something about Ethan's words, his dedication, moved her in a way she couldn't explain. Very well, Saren said, her voice filled with respect. We'll face this together. Later, at the outpost, the Zairi ship arrived at the outpost, its weapon systems still fully powered and ready for another fight. Ethan could feel the tension in the air as the ship approached the damaged facility. The outpost was barely hanging on, its shields flickering weakly as the last of the Kavori ships loomed in the distance. We've got this, Ethan muttered, more to himself than to Saren. But his words held the same weight they had before the battle together. They could overcome anything. Saren gave him a small smile, her hand resting on the console. I'll make sure of it. The final battle was about to begin. As the Zairi ship fired its first shot at the enemy fleet, Ethan felt a deep sense of peace. The fight would be hard, but this time, he wasn't running. He was standing by Saren's side, ready to protect the woman he had come to love. Saren wasn't just a queen anymore. She was the woman who had stolen his heart. And in that moment, he knew that he had made the right choice. He was where he belonged beside her, fighting for the future they both deserved.